Howdy folks, Doc here with Last Best Tool. And today let's talk staplers. I went around the homestead and dug up a few of them, and then I kind of considered what I liked and disliked about all of them, why I still have them around, and how they've changed over the years, and also how my use of them has changed. To begin, this is the kind of the classic sort of workshop stapler. This is the Arrow T50 Stapler, or they call it the T50P, that's the model. And it's actually named after the T50 staples, which it takes. I like that. It simplifies things. It's a classic design, kind of stamped metal. They almost never wear out. There are two issues I have with them. One is it takes a lot of effort. You know, if you're going to do a bunch of staples and you're having to click this thing each time with a pretty aggressive snap, it just wears on you. It's loud. So the use of it creates some problems. You know, you move it around, you have to try to hold it steady while you're applying a bunch of force. It's hard to use in awkward positions. Some people have to use two hands. You know, that's kind of the problem. One problem with it. The second is this slope of this line here, this handle, and it causes your hand to slip up and you lose leverage. It should really be flat, you know, or maybe some sort of an indentation, so you actually, you know, rest your palm in and it stays there. And I've got pretty good sized hands, and I can easily operate this thing, but most of the time when I watch other people try to use it, you know, they're grabbing it with both hands here, shaking, or they're trying to get. I mean, this is almost as slippery as a snap-on stubby screwdriver handle. But I mean, it's just hard to use. But it is elegant. I imagine this has been in the Museum of Modern Art as, you know, one of those great designs. But super slippery here, so it's hard to get good purchase. Otherwise, it's a good, rock solid, fairly inexpensive, durable stapler. After that, this is a common kind of stapler. It slams into the wood or the workpiece, kind of like a tack hammer or something. They're often called hammer tackers, or they actually make, I think Stanley makes a little smaller one called a sharpshooter, which to me is an oxymoron. I'll explain in a moment. It's a total contradiction. But anyway, it's a really good, solid stapler if you're like laying carpet, thin carpet or paper, or hanging things. I use this one in my range bag for targets, because you can, you know, there you go, good enough. That fast. Doesn't take a lot of effort to use. You're swinging something, but the momentum of this extra weight up here is what causes the staple, to be deployed. So the harder you swing, that's kind of what sets the depth. Can take different size staples. It's a good, solid, simple one. Pretty heavy though. I'll go over the weights in a moment. This one is my favorite when I'm using or when I'm laying wire, and that can be Romex in a framing job, or running computer line. If I'm trying to maintain the position of it, I don't want it moving around. This is great. And what this uses is cable staples, which look like these. They were pretty big. You get about 300 for 10 bucks, something like that. And so it's got a plastic, kind of insulated cover over where the staple slides down, so the metal doesn't directly touch the wire. So you've got the wood or the material here, and then this just slides through these two collars and holds the staple, or holds this thing in place. Now, I almost did it backwards. This one and this one are opposites. Something to remember. This is how you fire this guy. Here's the business end, and it's the opposite here. So you can see the handles. In fact, right there, if somebody just grabs this, there's a chance they're going to put something in backwards if they don't know how to use it. There's the staple. By the way, this actually is easier. They've got a grippy surface on here. It's easier to keep your hand in line. It's not sliding around, but still, they could make it a little bit better. Anyway, here's the staple. You can see how that is sitting up high. Here's a piece of Romex. So there's plenty of room. It's not anchoring it tight. You can get shorter staples. I've got the 15 by 9 millimeter staples here. You can get smaller ones that slide down closer to the workpiece to hold the material in tighter. But it's actually a really handy, quick way to guide anything from an extension cord, which you're not supposed to do, but I didn't tell you to do it anyway, but I'm just saying you could, to any other kinds of wires, whether it's Cat 5 or 6 cable, other power wire, as long as you're careful, and then anything else that you need to run a track for and keep it in position. And that can be also in, I can think of other uses besides just running wire, but that's a good solution, is the Klein. Couldn't get out of here without saying, here's your desk stapler. Found one of those. Remember on the days you'd crack that open and then whack it. Use it kind of like your hammer tacker. And then finally, here's my new favorite. This is the Milwaukee. And I kind of had a circuitous route to get to this thing. I couldn't figure out why I would really need it until I needed it, and then I, of course, got it right away. It runs on the M12 battery. You can use, like, big ones. This is a 3 amp hour. It's one of their newer little guys. This is amazing. They're getting 3 amp hours of 12 volt in this little same form factor as their 1 or 1.5 amp hour battery. I also have the 3s in the larger platform and in the 6s. But anyway, the reason you'd want something like this, and by the way, this one weighs in at 3.6 pounds. This is a heavy stapler, so if you're trying to reach up high on the ceiling or in corners or with your arm outstretched, or you're dangling off a ladder, this can be a bit of a weight pretty quick. This one here, this Arrow, this, even though it only weighs 1.9 pounds, the problem is the amount of force you have to put into it if you can't just do it with your hand. And so that now you're really going into some big numbers, trying to hold it steady. It's wiggling around and you're trying to push, especially if you're reaching out, tacking your Christmas lights like Chevy Chase or something. But anyway, that one's at 1.9 pounds. The Klein over here, this guy, is 1.8 pounds, a little bit lighter. It's made of some kind of resin material. I think maybe that's aluminum. Interesting, because I see a chip right there. I'll have to explore it. I bet it is. Maybe it's magnesium housing. Better be, actually, now I think about the price. But anyway, this one's 1.9 or 1.8. This was 1.9. And then this little guy here, the Stanley's actually 2.1, but it's supposed to be heavy because that's what drives the staple. And now we're way up here at this 3.6 pounds, but I can actually do a staple just like this. I'm going to set this down right here, and one finger here, one finger here. There's my staple right there. And I can actually adjust the depth too, but I can actually staple all day long, with very little effort. Whereas this one, to do that, whoops, even went off there. You probably recognize that. That's a pain in the butt. I do it with this, but I can't afford to waste all those staples. And then, of course, this one, which just, is probably the fastest out of all of them, the simplest. But the reason it's, I called the sharpshooter an oxymoron or a contradiction. This one is very hard to accurately place a staple. These, you can line things up, line things up exactly where you need them. Same here, there's sight lines. So I can get this right in or right on, exactly where I want it. This one's pretty good if I can hold it still. This one is really hard because you've got to swing it with enough lever arm to drop the staple exactly where you want it. So if I was aiming for like this little black dot right there, I was off to the side, lined up straight, but off. I was half there, hit it with the edge. You know, whereas if I was lining something up here, like this little oval, I can drop that right down, cover it. But anyway, those are the staplers that I use, and I like them. I'm getting old, so this one actually fits in my hand pretty well, and I can use it for a lot of things without the fatigue. But I can still operate one of those. I said I came to this kind of in a circuitous route. I started out with this. This is the Milwaukee M18 16 gauge finish nailer. Use this for putting in sideboards and wood flooring, especially some old thin reclaimed lumber and some cabins. And I got that because I was tired of using the kind of early generation DeWalt, which the battery didn't last very long. It was a pain to use, couldn't sight it very well. Anyway, ended up with this, which taught me a lot about using the Milwaukee kind of nailers. So I ended up with this. This is the 18 gauge brad nailer. Great for finer finishing work, especially if you've got softer materials or even some of that fake wood that seems to get into projects these days, especially in molding. Very easy to line up, very easy to use, to set the depth. I mean, it's just wonderful. And it better be, because this is the second generation. And I do have to hand it to Milwaukee. I'll give them half credit. Hand it to them because they make, this is the Gen 2, they made an unbelievable number of differences over the Gen 1, because the Gen 1 was a mess. And, you know, people were saying that, you know, it had all these problems. So the reason I give them half credit, yes, they abandoned their first gen and redid everything from the ground up, but they should have never let that first gen leave the factory. And that told me that in their testing evaluation, either they had a bunch of folks who were just, you know, saying, oh, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, instead of telling them exactly what's wrong with it. And then, of course, they put it in hands of the tradesmen, and, you know, it gets disastrous reviews. Well, they straightened it up. This thing is wonderful. But anyway, that's how I ended up kind of making the leap, thinking, well, maybe a battery-powered stapler like this isn't a foolish idea. And I've learned to love it. But I also use these other staplers for all kinds of things. So I'm glad we have choices. And with that, Doc out.